Welcome on into the Wolverine.com podcast. Clayton Safey here with Chris Ballas and Anthony Broom on a Thursday. I believe it's Holy Thursday, right? Heading into Easter weekend, a holiday weekend. So thank you for being here with us, everybody. Make sure to like the video if you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel. And this is the perfect time to get in right now at thewolverine.com. You can use the promo code UM1 for 2 months of premium access for just $1. Ton of conversation on our message board right now. Ton of premium articles coming out on both football with spring ball and basketball with the new era and Dusty May coming in. Transfer portal. He's going to be building the roster. He's going to be building the staff. So it is the perfect time to get over at thewolverine.com. We will talk about our commemorative issue here in just a second of our magazine. But first, welcome in the guys. And how's it going today, fellas?
Great. Looking forward to opening day, man. Detroit Tigers, World Series champs are bust this year. So I'm guessing bust, which is why I'm wearing my Lions gear.
I love this team, though.
I do, too. I always have, always will. And now I love the Lions again because they don't break my heart only in championship games now.
True.
Hey, that's a fair step up from years past. The thing about baseball season is that, and we've talked about this before. There are a few things in sports as fun as like your baseball team being in it every day, throughout the summer. And I would love to get back to that, but we'll make do best we can. But yeah, good to be here. It's an exciting week for Michigan. Dusty May era begins. Spring football is about to wrap up its second week, so things are rolling around these parts.
So here's the game plan for today. We will go through some key quotes from Dusty May's press conference. We'll kind of rapid fire through them, give our take on several of them. We will also talk about the Rod Moore injury at the end of the show, and then we will get out of here. But before we get into that, I want to talk about our commemorative issue of the Wolverine magazine, our special edition celebrating Michigan's 2023 national championship, 15-0 season. It's over 140 pages. You can get it in either softcover or the hardcover, the book edition, over at thewolverineondemand.com. The link is also in the description to the podcast here. It's in the description to the YouTube video, YouTube version of the video. So make sure to check it out. It is a great keepsake. I've been saying get 3, get one for yourself, one for a friend, and one for the archives to stow away for the generations to come. Give it to a kid or a grandkid down the line. So order 3 today. That is my pitch to you, but it's over at thewolverineondemand.com or the link in the bio. Let's get into Dusty May's press conference. I am going to read off some quotes here and we can kind of react. I thought he was super impressive on Tuesday. Again, winning the press conference. Does it really matter? Maybe, maybe not. But there's a lot you could glean from Dusty May based on his answers. And the first thing I liked, and this wasn't even an answer, this was in his opening statement, but he says, quote, "I want to thank the former Michigan players, coaches, and staffers. You built this place. I'm here to serve you and represent you as well as I can, but this is your program. I'm just a steward, and I'm blessed to do that. I will represent this program with class and dignity, and that is something we're never going to waver from." I thought that was a great way to start it out.
Yeah, I did too. Guessing he won't be smacking anybody, and hate to say it, but there were some black eyes here in the previous administration. So those are things that you want to avoid if you're going to have a long tenure here. And this guy seems to have a ton of class and did everything right, won the press conference, and hopefully he will on the floor too. But this was obviously the guy that we really wanted. I also want a Snickers, but he was really the guy. If you look at it and you go back in hindsight, there was a list and he was on the short list. And when he showed serious interest, and from what we understand, he was very adamant early on that Michigan would be a place that he would be viewed as a destination job. Then it got exciting. So when we got wind of it Saturday morning that Michigan was still interviewing him when everybody said he was headed to Louisville, I thought that was pretty telling. Michigan thought they had their guy, went out and got him. Very impressive guy. Now he's just got to win. And his expectations, he said, were to win in year one. And I love that. Don't make excuses. Go out and field a team. You can do it. You can literally, if he brings 3 guys with him from Florida Atlantic like we think he might. There are a couple Big Ten transfers. We just put up a story that he's already pursuing. Keep a couple of the Michigan kids in the fold, and then you're talking about a team that could probably compete for an NCAA tournament berth. And I don't think that's a stretch. So I love the hire. I think he's going to do a great job here. I think he'll be here for a long time.
Yeah, the thing of it too is that, like you said, you don't worry about winning a press conference, but at the same time, when you can sit there and listen to a guy clearly outline his vision, clearly outline what the identity of his teams are going to look like, I mean, that's more. And again, I'm not, don't want to use this as an opportunity to bash his predecessor by any means, but it was just more of a stronger statement of what his teams will look like than we ever got. From the guy he's following in Juwan Howard. And I think that's important. You set your vision from day one, you set your tone, you set your culture. And this is a guy who, vows that Michigan basketball will be fun to watch again. And, I'd argue that, if you're winning a bunch of games 44-42, winning is fun. But if you're, wins are fun regardless. But the style of play, I think, is going to, harken back to a lot of those Beeline era teams. They're going to play a little smaller. Again, it seems like he's got the wherewithal to adjust what they'll do based on the personnel that they have. But, they're going to shoot a lot of threes and they're going to get back on defense. And that's, when you look at the identity that he outlined and the way they want to play, again, really impressed. I mean, it's not hard to see why he was not just Michigan's number one choice, but really, I mean, you saw after Dusty was hired, all of these dominoes start falling across the country. So he was the guy that was going to kick off that search for everyone across college basketball. And the fact that, again, for as many warts as we feel like the Michigan athletic department might have in some areas, whether it be admissions, whether it be NIL, they got their guy. And Dusty May, I mean, in our introduction to him, and then even hearing some of the stuff, he did an outstanding podcast with Brian Bush, our buddy over at MGO Blue. This guy gets it. And again, I don't know what the ceiling is going to be, but I think the floor, the expectations, what he's going to do with this program, I think is he's going to keep them competitive and keep them in the mix. And then we'll see where it goes from there. And I love that he said from year one, that they're, going 8-24 to a place like Michigan isn't acceptable. That's why Juwan Howard lost his job. And I'd argue winning 11 games, 12 games probably isn't all that acceptable. So they're going to set a tone from day one that they expect to play in and compete for Big Ten titles, for national titles. And again, I think and he said it too, it's really important to set that tone from day one. And the tone's already been set as far as I'm concerned. And there's a lot to be excited about.
You kind of hit on the next quote we were going to get to, but it's the goal, he says, isn't to be enjoyable to watch. He kind of outlined that three core pillars, it seems like, of the program: the identity, he called it, teamwork, passion, and togetherness. And then, as you mentioned, he said, we probably shoot too many threes. We finish at the rim. We play modern basketball. We use analytics, use the metrics, but we try to find the best way for our guys to play that usually centers around what your players do best. So it's going to be interesting to see how that evolves over the years. Like year one, you're going to get the roster that you're going to get, but then as it goes, I think it'll probably start to shape more into his ideal vision. And every year is going to be different in college basketball, especially today. But you have a good sense that in reading up on the way he has done things at Florida Atlantic, where during COVID, he decided to use it like a professor's sabbatical and reach out to anybody and everybody and get on Zoom calls, anyone from the Spanish League to the NBA to junior high. Any coach that has ideas, he was willing to listen. And he kind of changed his philosophy on how he was going to use his big man, Vlad Golden, what wasn't necessarily a stretch big like he had at other times during his career, kind of evolved his offense. So I'm just excited to see how this roster shapes out and then what kind of style he uses based on who he has.
Well, that's the best part about it, right? It's not going to be a square peg round hole thing, like Rich Rodriguez, for example. And when he says it's going to be modern, you look at what John Beilein did here. If you don't want to hear about John Beilein, then this isn't the podcast for you, because he is the standard for Michigan basketball. And we're going to continue to talk about him and make some comparisons. So when he talks about, we're going to shoot probably too many threes, I go back to John Beilein's first press conference when he said, well, threes are worth more than twos, right? And I saw a lot of parallels there to what John Beilein said when he was introduced and the way he liked to play. And John Beilein adapted as well as anybody, fellas. When he needed better defense, he hired better defensive coaches, got better defensive players. They made a national championship game in a totally different way than they did the first time, right?
Yes.
And that's the sign of a good coach. And that's exactly what I think you're hearing from Dusty May and what he is. The other thing that he said was about culture and fits, right? He's not just going to take a guy because he's there and he's a 4-star player or something like that. John Beilein didn't care what you rated a guy coming out of high school. For example, Trey Burke was a 3-star. Tim Hardaway was a 3-star. Nick Stauskas wasn't a 4-star until late in the process. I think he was finished number 72, 73 overall, but he was the guy he had to have. And I think you're going to see a lot of that from Dusty May too. And I love the fact that Dusty May said he was going to lean on guys like John Beilein. Again, I will continue to say that. You'd be foolish not to. So, but I love the fact that he does have that vision. He knows how he wants to win. He does. And one of my colleagues, who was actually a colleague of Dusty May's back in the day, said it best. It's like he already knows this place. And I think part of it is because he grew up in Big Ten country, right? And he was in the Big Ten for a while and understands rivalries, understands Big Ten basketball. So to me, perfect fit. They got their guy, and listening to him talk and listening to people talk about him was, again, like listening to people talk about John Beilein back in the day. You guys got your home run hire, whether it's Jay Billis or anybody else who knows basketball. They understand that Michigan got a really good one here.
Yeah, and when you hear the national people too, they talk like Michigan punched above its weight and getting a guy like Dusty May, which is, I don't know that I necessarily believe. I mean, given you put this program next to what Louisville is right now, yeah, they're trying to throw a bunch of money at fixing their program, but they're probably on option 5 or 6 now when it comes to their coaching search. So again, it just speaks to the vision that was laid out, not just by Dusty May, but by Ward Manuel, by John Beilein, as they went down to Florida over the weekend and closed the deal. And again, you get the sense, like I said earlier, that and Chris, you brought up a great point. When Michigan made it back to the national title game, in 2018, it looked completely different because there were different emphases, there were different ways, to build the roster, different coaches on staff. And I guess maybe now that's my biggest question is who joins him on this staff. I think that's something that probably comes together somewhat quickly, given the fact there's a lot of building to do. You want to hit the ground running here, but when you talk about the vision that he laid out, again, I cannot compliment it anymore. I mean, it was as clear, as thorough and concise. And it's a guy who speaks with a lot of conviction too, which I like. It's not just happy to be there. Like, he has a plan, and he expects Michigan to get back to those heights of, 4 or 5 years ago, whatever it was. So, I mean, everything he laid out is, I think, something people should be excited about.
Yeah, and it's like every answer, it's not like anything was rehearsed or anything, but like he already knew what his belief is on just about everything to do with basketball and just about everything to do with winning games and building a program, which I thought was really impressive. And he's done it before. It's not like Juwan Howard, who knew the NBA game really well and knew basketball well and is a basketball lifer. And he made his fame in college basketball, but Dusty May's a college basketball lifer. He's been around for over 20 years. He was with Bob Knight. He got yelled at for writing down too many notes at practice from Bob Knight, that sort of thing that I thought really impressed me. I want to move on to this next one. Dusty May says, we obviously have one of the best alumni bases in the world, and it's a university that really supports athletics. Probably over the last year, our roles and responsibilities as coaches changed and evolved. I probably spent about 25 to 30% of my time on NIL, recruiting donors, giving access to our program, doing anything we could to provide opportunities for our players. It is what it is. I've learned to enjoy it. It's not going away. And I'd love for our players to be taken care of as much as possible and rewarded for the work that they put in. I think Ward Manuel also said that Dusty expressed to him during their meetings that he wants to be a partner in the NIL. He doesn't want to just sit there and rely on the athletic department and whine about what he's not getting. He wants to take ownership in that, which I think was important. I just got off the phone before we started recording here with Ken Levica, who's the play-by-play voice of FAU. And I said, how did he keep that roster intact from the Final Four run to this year, where then they become the second winningest team in FAU history? And he said he told those guys, one, they were transparent with him on who was tampering, and they said, hey, we have options. He understood that. He said he sat down in the spring and the summer, and he told those guys that he will do anything and everything he possibly can to make sure they have the most opportunities with NIL, any opportunity that they want. There wasn't a hand he didn't shake. There wasn't a donor he didn't meet. There wasn't a call he didn't put in to put his guys in position. He's, Chris, you wrote the story, but he's going to be relentless. He's going to be relentless in everything. And I think that was really encouraging to hear. 25 to 30% seems high, but he's willing to do whatever. And by the way, 25 to 30%, but we're talking about a guy that's constantly working. So he's still doing a lot in other areas, but I thought that was pretty interesting to hear.
Yeah, basketball junkie. You don't think I offended him with that question, do you? With the basketball junkie thing?
No, I think he got a kick out of it.
He did get a kick out of it, but it was an interesting choice of words, and that's what he is. He's like he said, I don't have any hobbies, and in that respect, he kind of sounded like Jim Harbaugh when he said, "I'm a jackhammer, right? I have no hobbies. I wake up every morning starving to get better." And I'm like, okay, you got that. And what did Jim Harbaugh do, guys, on the NIL trail? He was out front for Empower, and he was going around the country, and he was trying to raise money, and he wanted to be the face of it. And sometimes it worked, and sometimes it didn't, because I don't think he had the full backing of the athletic department at that point. I think he does now. And I think that Dusty May will too, and he wanted to make sure of that before he took the job. So he heard what he needed to hear when Ward Manuel went down there, and give credit to Ward Manuel. There were some people that wanted to wait and said, hey, man, he just got bounced from the tournament. Let's wait a couple days. And, said, no, I got to get my guy. He's in demand. Let's go get him. And he did. And I give him credit for that. So it was clear that Dusty May wanted to be here. And Dusty May kind of made that clear as well, didn't he? When he said, I knew from the outset that Michigan would be one of the jobs that I would really, really want to explore. And even though everybody at Louisville just assumed, hey, we're better than Michigan and so on and so forth, and we got better basketball, and which is, again, is debatable if you look at the records over the last 30 years or so, right? Barring the lost decade there of Michigan basketball with Tommy Amaker and Brian Ellerby, Michigan basketball is right up there with anybody. So I would agree with Anthony that, hey, when you look at the tournament wins under John Beilein and Juwan Howard, at one point over a decade, they had more tournament wins than anybody, even the Blue Bloods. So yes, you can win here if you do it right, if you're the right guy, if you get the right fits. It starts with the basketball coach. They definitely got the right fit there.
Yeah, and when it comes to NIL too, I mean, something, we talk about this with modern coaches all the time, is that you're not just the X's and O's guy that gets on the plane once in a while, and goes and sees a recruit. Like, you are constantly, recruiting. You're recruiting your own roster now. I think in NIL, you're almost somewhat like a politician, where you have to go out and be the driving force behind generating donations and shaking hands with people and making those types of connections. And again, everything that we've heard about Dusty May, and everything that like Clayton, what you're working on, I'm sure will illustrate that this is a guy that is 110% in every aspect of the job. So again, and I've said it before, this is probably as close to a home run hire as you can get. It's the best hire that Michigan could have made. He was the top candidate on the market. And it doesn't guarantee success. There could always be pitfalls. There could always be something that happens and comes out of left field. But, when you just look at, him as an evaluator, him as a tactician, him as a fundraiser, him as a culture guy, I mean, it just seems like it's A++ in every single category. So now, like I said before, all of the work begins. You're going to find out, what his chops are in NIL and recruiting the portal and recruiting high school guys right away, because there are at least maybe 6 or 7 spots up for grabs, maybe more, on this roster as they build for next year. So, the thing about having a guy like this, like an Energizer Bunny type of guy, is that he's going to be tested in pretty much every phase of this job right away. And I think that's fascinating. And I think that when you look at the challenge ahead, I think Michigan got the right guy in that regard too.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see how he balances wanting to do well in year one, but also getting guys maybe that are a little bit younger that can be a foundation for the future. And as he said, being good in year one is part of the build, because you can sell year one. But, we'll see what exactly they are on the floor this year. But either way, like, just following each and every move is going to be interesting. And those moves are going to include staff changes. His head assistant or lead assistant coach, I should say, at Florida Atlantic, Kyle Church, was the interim head coach. He was named that by the AD as soon as Dusty May stepped down and took the Michigan job. He will not be the head coach for Florida Atlantic full time. He was a candidate, but they're giving it to a Baylor assistant whose name escapes me. That makes things interesting because I think you could see Kyle Church come over, and it will be intriguing to see what his staff looks like. Will it be, a mixture? He kind of alluded to this. It will be a mixture of FAU guys and new coaches. Could he retain a guy like Sadie Washington if he doesn't get the UDM job? It looks like he's a finalist for that. I believe it's Todd Abernathy as well, has been with him for a long time, is a FAU assistant, could come over. But your guys' thoughts on what he needs to do? Does it need to be geographical with recruiting? Do you need to have Midwest guys like a Sadie? I think would be great. What would you look for in your staff if you're?
I would love to have Sadie back. Honestly, it's funny that all the blame that the assistant coaches got for the failures of this administration. That it wasn't fair. If you look at the NIL aspect of it, I don't remember seeing Juwan Howard anywhere. When it came to trying to raise money for NIL, and so I'm not saying that it was all his fault. But I think there is certainly room for improvement, and that Dusty May will do that. We will have a hot board up shortly, guys. As soon as this podcast is done, I am finishing that up. But there are several names that I can think of that I have been told to watch. And I believe Dusty May said in his press conference that it'll probably be a mixture of old guys and new guys. Yep. So that'll be something to watch. There's no question that he'll bring some FAU guys with him, but he's also smart enough to know that if you have a guy familiar with the program and some of the recruits that they're bringing in, that's not going to be a bad thing either. So that's why I could see a Sadie Washington sticking around. And I know he's passed up on some opportunities to stay as a Michigan assistant. Doesn't mean that he doesn't have ambition. And I want to make that very clear. There are family considerations. And that's what he told me a few years back, that, sometimes that trumps your personal ambition. And it doesn't mean that you can't be successful in the role that you have, but there are no guarantees, especially at a place like UDM, fellas, where it's hard to win, especially in this day and age. So we'll see how that plays out, but keep an eye on that. I have no doubt, like he said, that they will be great fits in terms of teachers and students of the game and everything else. So I trust his judgment, and I do believe he will listen to guys like John Beilein and other coaches he respects when it comes to filling out those staffs.
Yeah, and with Dusty May too. I mean, I know at Florida Atlantic he was a first-time head coach, but he had before that 15 years of assistant coaching experience, and even more than that when you talk about some of the grad assistant work that he was doing. So has a network of guys, even if it's not just his FAU guys. He knows who's qualified. He knows who to look for. Something I would advocate for, if John Beilein is in your ear, Luke Yaklich is out there and available. You talk about wanting to be a lead at both ends of the floor. I think that would be a phone call to at least make. I don't know if Yaklich would come back to Michigan or not, but I mean, there's a lot of options out there. But keeping it somewhat intact with both what he knows, and then if a guy like Sadie sticks around, then you've got this nice blend of the old and the new. And again, there were problems operationally the last few years with what went on under Juwan Howard, but I certainly don't think that Sadie Washington was part of that. And he's a guy, if anything, that was probably keeping the peace behind the scenes. So in terms of a little bit of continuity, if you're trying to re-recruit some of the guys that were here already, I think that would be a nice play. But we'll see what happens. I have no doubts that he'll put a good staff together in year one to help him hopefully lead this team to the leap that he hopes it takes in year one.
Another name I'll mention is Darius Nichols, who's a guy who both John Beilein mentioned the other day on the radio on the Huge Show, and a guy that Dusty May mentioned during his press conference as well. He's the head coach at Radford right now, but they coached together for a long time at Louisiana Tech. In Florida, he's a head coach. We just saw Jake Diebler take a low major head coach and make him an assistant coach at Ohio State. So like you said, AB, like there are guys all over the country that Dusty May has not only worked with, but guys that, like I mentioned during COVID and other points, and he said it too in response, I think, Chris, to one of your questions the other day. It's like, or it might have been somebody else's question, but like he'll listen to a podcast or he'll see something and he'll just start calling whoever it is that said, or, that he saw something that stood out to him and he will network with them and he will learn from them. So he has a lot of connections that could help him in this staff building process. And he talked about that helping him in the transfer portal process too, because it's like speed dating. But if you have a lot of connections around the country, you can get to learn and get to know, what these kids are like. So a lot of moves will be made in the coming days. CB, you got something?
Yeah, I was going to say, I can confirm that he has not reached out to us yet after this podcast. So
yeah, right. Maybe a support staff role for Anthony or something.
Exactly. Or you. Yeah.
I would take it. I'd be a student manager.
You're under contract, buddy. You're under contract. Bite your tongue.
I could work 2 jobs.
You probably would too. We got some workhorses on this staff.
No doubt. So there'll be a lot to watch. And again, thewolverine.com is a place to cover or to follow all of it. We will be covering all of it over there. So either or. Let's move on to football and a really disappointing injury to Rod Moore, reportedly tore his ACL in practice. It's one that just stings. Like, as we cover this guy, and he's one of my favorite guys to cover and talk to and listen to and watch play football. He's made so many big plays over the years, going back to his freshman season, but obviously the pick against Ohio State last year to seal it. Calling game, as he called it, against the team that didn't recruit him. But here's my thing is, like, you have Makari Page, you have Quentin Johnson coming back. That was a huge, huge addition now, especially with the Rod Moore injury. But Rod Moore was a difference maker, and it's hard to find those guys.
It really is. And, we will report it when it's made public. And we've talked to Michigan about it. We understand what happened and the severity of the injury. We don't believe he will be back in 2024. I know that a lot of people said, well, we hope that he comes back and he has one of those quick returns like Jake Ryan. But more first and foremost, the most important thing is him healing up and getting better and not coming back too soon. Does this mean he's coming back in 2025 for a 5th year? Who knows? More than anything, again, I just want the kid to heal and to reach his potential in terms of getting a full recovery and his NFL potential, because that's where he's going to make his money. And, the sad irony here that, he chooses to come back and then all of a sudden, hopefully, let's just put it this way. Hopefully he has an insurance policy or had an insurance policy. And if not, I think that's something else that the NCAA needs to explore for some of these kids to encourage them to stay in school in addition to NIL. So, but Rod Moore, one of my favorite Wolverines ever. And that's saying something, guys. Just the way he plays, just the way he carries himself. We're going to try to get him on a podcast. Doug Skeen and I are here in the next few weeks when things kind of settle down and if he has a surgery and everything else. But hopefully people will go to his page and support his NIL products, his shirts and everything else. Remember, I think it was called Game. Was it one of the?
He put it on a T-shirt. He called Game and he put it on a
Game, and really, he was right. So, but miss seeing him out there. Some guys are going to have to step up. We've already heard, and we put in an ITF yesterday inside the fort that there are some guys making moves. Makari Page, I think, is going to have his best year. He's going to have to be more vocal now, fellas. You're going to need some of those leaders to step up. But this is a guy that is really, really hard to replace. They played with him for without 4 games last year. I think they played without him. So getting Quentin Johnson back at this point is really huge too. And I think they're probably still going to have to go to get somebody in the portal as well.
Yeah, I'm writing about the Rod Moore contingency plan right now, so to speak. And it revolves around, obviously, those 2 guys that you mentioned, Quentin Johnson, Makari Page. But then you've got those guys on the back. Zeke Berry last year was someone who I thought after RJ Moten transferred in the spring was going to have a shot to maybe work his way into the role that Keon Saab eventually had. Then he gets injured. I think that Zeke Berry is an up-and-comer that will play a role in all of this. Brandon Hillman, something I liked. We've heard good things about him early on in spring. The other thing is, he quoted something that it's not something that Chris said, but it is something that Chris just said on the show. He sent out a tweet that said Michigan needs to land an impact DB in the transfer portal, in quotes, as kind of self-motivation. So he's a guy that I think is taking the opportunity and taking maybe what people are even saying about the situation as fuel, as something to get himself mentally into the mix there. And physically, I think he's already in the mix in terms of the things that we've heard about his play so far. So again, when you lose a Rod Moore, a guy who is so, they track they were tracking how much film you could watch via the iPads and things like that. And Rod Moore was a guy that always Jim Harbaugh would say was at the top of that list. So talking about being a film junkie earlier with Dusty May, Rod Moore certainly a guy that lives and breathes the sport as well. So you lose that, you lose the instincts, you lose the playmaking. I think maybe his 2 best games at Michigan were probably in those college football playoff games. Certainly the Rose Bowl. I think he was outstanding. So yeah, I mean, it sucks and it hurts, and that's a guy that probably still will be a captain this fall, but man, oh man, to lose a player like that this early in the offseason, and maybe that's the silver lining of it. Like if he is able to make some kind of miraculous recovery and you play into mid-January again, maybe there's an outside shot there. But at this point, I think you kind of have to roll with the guys that you have and let them grow from there. So just a blow for this team from a leadership standpoint, from an on-field production standpoint, and like I said, one of our favorites. So you wish him the best moving forward.
We had the best producer, by the way. Goes out and gets that tweet. Good job, Megan. And even though she didn't use my Simply Dusty CD cover, which really hurt, that Isaiah Hole made for us. So maybe someday. But yeah, Brandon Hillman, man, I'm excited to see him. We're hearing some good things about him. There are plenty of athletes on this team, guys. There's plenty of team speed on defense. Going to be really, really exciting to see how it comes together.
Did you DM him that Michigan needs to add an impact DB in the transfer portal?
He probably read my article. It's like, you know what? But we're not the only ones saying it. Everybody is. You know what? Prove it to us, buddy. Go out there and take care of business and do what you need to do. And I'll tell you what, if they can somehow get past the Rod Moore injury without too much damage, then then this defense is going to be really, really good because he was something special.
No doubt. And I think that was the point of the tweet. He's motivated by it, and it's time for those guys to step up, like Rod Moore did when he was young, and they needed him to step in. So, and I'm sure he'll be there, every step of the way with those guys to help them out. So, disappointing injury that we had to hit on as well. But that is going to be our show for today. Make sure to head to thewolverine.com. Use the promo code UM1 for 2 months of premium access for just $1. Also, like the video if you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel. Appreciate everybody doing that. We'll see you next time. Yeah, there's the book right there as well, the commemorative edition of the magazine at thewolverineondemand.com.